Box arts used to be arguably the main way you decide on whether to buy a game or not. Especially as children, we'd often base our decision solely on how cool the cover looked in the store. Of course, nowadays we don't rely on this because we have a ton of gameplay videos, trailers, information and reviews online to go by, but it's still an important part of marketing a game, and developers will often change them between different regions, sometimes subtly and sometimes quite drastically in ways they feel will make them sell better in those respective locations. So today we're taking a look and talking about some examples of the regional changes to box art between Japan, Europe and the US, and seeing how they stack up to one another. To start, we're going to be comparing one of the most well-known changes, one you've very likely seen many times before, but it's a great example, and that's Eco. The Japanese version is visually great. The location is the main focal point, the main characters are surprisingly extremely small, but it works. It gives a sense of mystery and atmosphere that the game's about, and effectively shows its great art direction. The European version remains absolutely unchanged, however the same can't be said for the US. The American copy takes a very different approach, bringing the main characters right to the foreground, and although it does feature a similar environment behind them, it's nowhere near as prominent, ultimately resulting in removing a lot of the sense of exploration the others do, making it seem like a generic action game. I understand the reasoning behind many of the changes made for a different audience, but the execution was so wrong. Next, we're going to be looking at another from the PS2 era, Ratchet & Clank 2. This one's interesting because it differs between all three regions, not just artistically, but also in name. In the US it's called Ratchet & Clank 2 Going Commando, and features both of the main characters along with one of the many guns, the Mega Rocket Tube. In Europe, the cover is actually quite similar, in style at least, but interestingly changes the weapon to the Tesla coil, with arguably the biggest difference being in the name, going by the name of Ratchet & Clank 2 Locked and Loaded, removing the sexual innuendo title, maybe fearing repercussions for what is essentially a game aimed at children. The Japanese cover on the other hand is extremely different from both, using an anime style design and even altering Ratchet's appearance slightly with thicker, darker eyebrows. Something you'll hopefully notice is the difference in Ratchet's expression, with a much friendlier, less angry demeanour than that of the US and EU counterparts, and this is actually quite a common trend across many other games, with easily the most notable being the Kirby series, where often the box arts will be almost identical, except with a change to Kirby's expression. Moving on to another Nintendo title, we have Okami Den, the often forgotten sequel to the fantastic Okami. With the Japanese box art, we get a serene image depicting both the characters on a stroll through the countryside, with a big cherry blossom standing out in the background. The US and European box arts on the other hand have a much greater emphasis on the combat side of things as opposed to exploration, with Chibi Tarasu diving into battle with Kuni atop displaying a drawn sword. A change that was evidently made as Capcom thought it would have a greater appeal to Western audiences, but the Japanese cover is just so much more intriguing and eye-catching in my opinion. Next up is Metal Gear Solid 4, another that features different box art for the three regions. All of them display a close-up of Solid Snake, with both the Japanese and European versions going for a similar artistic approach. The most interestingly are homages to the art from the original Metal Gear Solid on the PS1 that makes them all the better. The US version doesn't follow suit, placing a CGI version of Snake on the box instead. It doesn't exactly look bad, but the MGS series up to this point always had great artistic covers, so it's a little sad to see this trend of simply slapping a CGI character on them gradually take over. Let's talk about another PS3 title from the same era, Heavy Rain. For Japan the cover is very minimalistic, which suits the tone and mystery, but with that said it's not all that clear exactly what the game is about. The US cover on the other hand falls into the typical trap of what many box arts do nowadays, placing all the characters front and centre along the weapon so you absolutely know there's going to be some action in there, leaving it ultimately not very unique or memorable. The European art I feel is easily the best. It's minimalistic, dark and rather sinister, focusing purely on the origami figure that plays so heavily into the plot. It may have the same problem as the Japanese art of not being all that telling of what to expect from the game, but it fits a mysterious tone perfectly. What about the Final Fantasy series? Much like Okami Den, Final Fantasy 15 is a great example of how Western box arts tend to depict the characters in combat most prominently, whereas the Japanese focus more on the environments and exploration. The Western cover has Noctis and Co. along with Noctis' sword as the main focal point, whereas in the Japanese version they are comparatively much smaller with their backs turned and not a weapon in sight, emphasising the journey and camaraderie aspects of the game. And finally, there are those where it's a European box art that's the odd one out compared to the US and Japan. This was the case with the latest Legend of Zelda title, Breath of the Wild. Both give a really good look at the vastness of Hyrule, but the European version is distinctly more colourful and has Link's face clearly visible, while the US one gives a more classic hero vibe. Although I think the colour palette of the European copy is more realistic to that of the actual game, it's hard to compete with the Japanese and US one, where you really get a sense of the grand adventure Link is about to embark on that I don't think the PAL alternative captures as well. Which region do you think has the best box arts, and which change was worst in your opinion? Let me know down in the comments. If you liked this video, maybe I'll do another in the future, analysing different examples. That's it for today. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content just like this. Click the thumbnail on the left or right for another of my videos. Thanks for watching as usual, and I'll see you on the next video.